I remember standing in that doorway, my hand trembling on the knob, my purse hanging from my shoulder like it had 1,000 times before. "Just going to the store," I called out to the living room, where 3 pairs of eyes barely glanced up from their screens. My voice sounded different that morning, steadier than it had been in years, like it belonged to someone who'd finally made a decision they should have made decades ago. Nobody answered. They never did anymore unless they needed something. I pulled the door closed behind me with a soft click that echoed louder in my chest than it should have. Walked down those familiar concrete steps I'd climbed carrying groceries for 47 years, and got into my old car. The engine started on the second try, same as always. I backed out of the driveway, glancing one last time at the house with its peeling paint and overgrown yard that I'd been meaning to tend to, always meaning to, always putting everyone else first. At the corner of Maple and 3rd, where I should have turned left toward the supermart, I turned right instead. And I kept driving. That was 6 months ago, and I've never been happier in my entire life. My name is Dorothy Eileen Richardson, though everyone's called me Dot since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. I'm 69 years old now, and I'm sitting in a cozy little apartment in Asheville, North Carolina, about 300 miles from the life I left behind in Greenville, South Carolina. The morning sun comes through my window and hits my coffee cup just right, making the steam rise up in these pretty little spirals. And I got all the time in the world to watch it, because nobody's hollering for me to find their socks or make them breakfast or explain where I put their important papers that they left on the kitchen counter under a pile of junk mail. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You're probably wondering what kind of woman just up and leaves her whole life behind at 69 years old, walking out the door like she's going to buy milk and never coming back. Well, let me tell you something. I wondered that myself for about 45 years. Wondered what kind of person could do such a thing. Turns out I'm that kind of person. And if you're listening to this story, if something in that opening made your heart beat a little faster, made you think good for her, or maybe even, I wish I could, then maybe you're that kind of person too. Before we go any further, I want you to do me a favor. If you're enjoying this story, if you want to hear how a woman who spent nearly 50 years being everyone's maid, cook, chauffeur, and emotional support system finally said enough, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. I know. Everyone asks for that, but here's the thing. Every subscription, every like, every comment you leave telling me where you're watching from, that helps this channel reach more women who need to hear that it's never too late to choose yourself. It takes you 2 seconds to tap that button, and it means the world to me and to all the other women out there who think their chance at happiness expired when they turned 60. So go ahead, subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Your support keeps these real stories coming. And trust me, this one's going to make you feel things. Now, let's get back to how I got here. I was born in 1955 in a little town outside of Charlotte called Belmont. My daddy worked at the textile mill, and my mama took in sewing and ironing to make ends meet. We weren't poor exactly, but we weren't comfortable neither. I was the youngest of 5 kids. Had 3 older brothers and 1 sister, Marlene, who was 2 years older than me, and prettier than a speckled pup, with blonde hair that curled just right, without her even trying. I had mousy brown hair that hung straight as a board, and a gap between my front teeth that I was self-conscious about until I was about 40, and stopped caring what people thought of my teeth. Growing up in the late 50s and 60s in a small southern town meant you learned real quick what was expected of you if you were a girl. My brothers could run wild, come home with scraped knees and torn shirts, and Mama would just shake her head and patch them up. But me and Marlene, we had to be little ladies. We had to help with the cooking and cleaning. We had to be polite and quiet and never talk back. We had to learn how to take care of a house and a family, because that's what we were going to do with our lives, whether we wanted to or not. I wasn't a rebellious kid. I wish I could tell you I was, that I fought against all that and demanded to be treated equal to my brothers. But I didn't. I just accepted it as the way things were. I was a good girl, a helpful girl, the kind of daughter who never caused trouble, who always did what she was told, who made her mama proud by being useful. And that became my identity so deep and so early that I didn't even realize it was happening. I was the helper, the caretaker, the one who made sure everyone else was okay. When I was 17, I met James Michael Richardson at a church picnic. He was 21, just back from a stint in the Army, working at his daddy's auto repair shop. He was tall and had nice shoulders and told me I had the prettiest smile he'd ever seen, gap and all. We courted for about 8 months, and then we got married in March of 1973, 2 weeks after I turned 18. I wore my sister's wedding dress, taken in to fit me, and carried daisies because roses were too expensive. We had our reception in the church fellowship hall with punch and a sheet cake, and I thought I was the luckiest girl in the world. We moved into a little rental house on Sycamore Street. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it was ours, and I set about making it a home. I got a job at the dime store downtown, working the register and stocking shelves. And James worked at the shop with his daddy. We were going to save up for a house of our own, maybe start a family in a few years when we were more settled. That lasted about 6 months. I got pregnant with our daughter Jessica in the fall of 1973, and suddenly, all our plans changed. James's daddy told him he needed to work more hours if he was going to support a family. And my boss at the dime store said I could work until I started showing, but after that, well, it wouldn't look right having a pregnant lady at the register. So I quit work in my 4th month, and that was the last paycheck I ever earned in my own name for the next 46 years. Jessica was born in May of 1974, and she was beautiful. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a head full of dark hair, and lungs that could wake the neighbors 3 houses down. I was 19 years old, barely knew how to take care of myself, and suddenly I had this tiny human being depending on me for everything. James tried to help at first, but he was working 10, sometimes 12-hour days at the shop, and when he came home covered in grease and exhausted, I couldn't bring myself to ask him to take a turn walking the floor with a colicky baby. So I did it. I did all of it. The feeding, the changing, the walking, the worrying. 20 months later, our son Michael came along. And then 2 years after that, our youngest, Amanda. 3 kids in 5 years. Our little rental house was bursting at the seams, and I was drowning in diapers and dishes and laundry that never seemed to end. We moved to a bigger place when Amanda was 2, a 3-bedroom house James's uncle owned, sold to us cheap because it needed work. James was going to fix it up, make it real nice. That was in 1980. He never did get around to most of those repairs. But I'm not here to badmouth James. He wasn't a bad man. He wasn't mean or violent. He didn't cheat on me or drink away his paycheck or any of those things that would have given me a clear reason to be unhappy. He just wasn't really present. He went to work, came home, ate the dinner I made, watched TV, and went to bed. On weekends, he worked on cars in the garage or watched sports. He loved the kids in his way. He'd play with them sometimes, take Michael fishing once in a while, but the day-to-day stuff, that was all me. The cooking was all me. The cleaning was all me. The homework, help, and permission slips and parent-teacher conferences were all me. The doctor's appointments and birthday parties and finding someone to watch the kids when they were sick, all me. James provided the money, and I provided everything else. And somehow, without us ever really discussing it or agreeing to it, that became our marriage. He was the provider, I was the caretaker. And those roles got set in concrete so hard and so fast that by the time I realized I didn't like the arrangement, it was already too late to change it. The years passed the way they do when you're busy, in a blur of school events and scraped knees and growth spurts that meant new clothes we couldn't really afford. Jessica grew up quiet and studious, always with her nose in a book. Michael was my wild child, always getting into some kind of mischief, coming home with torn jeans and a sheepish grin. Amanda was the baby, spoiled a little by all of us, sweet-natured and easygoing. I loved my kids. I want to be clear about that. I loved them fiercely and completely, the way mothers do. But somewhere in the middle of loving them and taking care of them and making sure they had everything they needed, I disappeared. Dorothy Eileen Richardson, the girl who used to sneak romance novels from the library and dream about traveling to places she'd only seen in magazines, just vanished. In her place was Mom. Just Mom. And then later, when my kids' friends started coming around, I became Michael's mom, or Jessica's mom. Not Dot, not Dorothy, just somebody's mom. When Jessica graduated high school in 1992, I thought maybe things would get easier. 1 down, 2 to go, and then I'd have more time for myself. Maybe I'd get a part-time job, earn a little spending money, have something that was mine. But Jessica didn't go away to college like we'd hoped. She got pregnant by her boyfriend Derek that summer, and they got married in a quick courthouse ceremony in August. By December, she was living back at home because Derek had taken off, couldn't handle being a father at 19. So there I was, 40 years old with 2 teenagers still at home and a daughter with a newborn baby, all of us under one roof. My first grandbaby, little Kayla, was precious as could be, but she cried even more than Jessica had as a baby. I'd be up at night helping Jessica with her, then getting up early to make breakfast for Michael and Amanda before school. James would sleep through all of it, said he had to work in the morning and needed his rest. Jessica lived with us for 3 years. 3 years of diapers and formula and babysitting, while she worked at the Piggly Wiggly to save up money. I didn't mind helping with Kayla, truly I didn't. But it was like I'd rewound the clock on my life. Just when I thought I might be getting close to some freedom, I was right back in the thick of it. Michael graduated in 1994 and surprised us all by joining the Air Force. He left for basic training that summer, and I cried for days. My boy, going off into the world. And part of me was so proud, and part of me was terrified, and part of me, a part I felt guilty about, was relieved. 1 less person to cook for, 1 less person to clean up after, 1 less person depending on me. Amanda graduated in 1996, went to community college for a year, then dropped out to marry her boyfriend, Travis. They moved into an apartment across town, and I thought, finally, it's just going to be me and James. I was 44 years old, and for the first time since I was 19, I didn't have kids living under my roof. It lasted exactly 7 months. Jessica had gotten married again, to a man named Paul, who seemed nice enough, and they'd gotten their own place with little Kayla, who was 5 by then. Amanda was settled with Travis. Michael was stationed in Colorado. I had this strange, empty house, and I didn't quite know what to do with myself. I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be no one to make breakfast for except James, and he usually just grabbed a cup of coffee and left. I'd do laundry out of habit and realized there was hardly any. Just me and James's clothes. The grocery shopping got simpler. The cooking got simpler. Everything got simpler. And I felt completely lost. I'd spent 25 years being needed every single minute of every single day, and suddenly, I wasn't needed quite so much. I should have been happy about that. I should have been thrilled. But instead, I felt purposeless, like I didn't know who I was if I wasn't taking care of someone. So when Jessica called in the spring of 1997, crying because Paul had left her, and she couldn't afford the rent on her own, I said, "Come home, honey. You and Kayla come home." And when Amanda called a few months later, saying Travis had gotten laid off and they were about to lose their apartment, I said, "Y'all can stay with us until you get back on your feet." James wasn't happy about it. "Dot, we raised our kids," he said. "They're adults now. They need to figure things out on their own." But I couldn't stand the thought of my girls struggling, of my grandbaby not having a stable place to live. So I put my foot down, one of the few times in our marriage, and they moved in. It was supposed to be temporary. Just a few months, maybe 6 at the most. Jessica and Kayla stayed for 4 years. Amanda and Travis stayed for 2. And during those years, I fell right back into the role I knew so well. Cooking for 6 people, cleaning up after 6 people, doing laundry for 6 people, breaking up arguments between my adult daughters about whose turn it was to use the bathroom, watching Kayla after school while Jessica worked, listening to Travis complain about how hard it was to find a decent job while he sat on my couch watching my TV and eating my food. James started spending more and more time in the garage. He'd eat dinner, thank me for cooking, and disappear. Can't say I blamed him. The house was chaotic and loud, and we had no privacy, no peace. Our bedroom was the only space that was just ours, and most nights James would fall asleep, watching TV while I'd lie there wondering how my life had ended up like this. But here's the thing, and this is important. I never thought about leaving. Not once during all those years did it occur to me that I could just stop, that I could say no, that I could choose myself over everyone else, because that's not what good mothers did. Good mothers sacrificed. Good mothers put their children first, always, even when those children were grown adults who should have been standing on their own 2 feet. Good mothers didn't complain or ask for help or admit that they were drowning under the weight of everyone else's needs. So, I didn't complain. I didn't ask for help. I just kept going, day after day, year after year, until being exhausted and unappreciated felt normal, until I couldn't remember what it felt like to want something just for myself. Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed, all the little moments that should have told me something was wrong. But when you're in it, when you're living it every single day, you don't see the patterns. You just see the individual moments, and each one seems manageable on its own. It's only when you step back, or in my case, when you finally break free, that you can see the whole picture. And let me tell you, the picture wasn't pretty. The first sign came on my 50th birthday in 2005. I woke up that morning feeling like maybe this year would be different. Maybe someone would make a fuss, do something special. It was a milestone birthday after all, the big 50. Jessica and Kayla were still living with us then, and Amanda stopped by most days even though she and Travis had finally gotten their own place again. I thought maybe they'd planned something, a cake, a card, anything to acknowledge that I'd been on this earth for half a century. I got up and made breakfast like always. French toast because it was Saturday, and I had time to do something nicer than cereal. James came into the kitchen, kissed me on the cheek, said, "Morning, Dot," and grabbed a plate. He didn't say happy birthday. I figured he was waiting until later, maybe had a surprise planned. Jessica came down with Kayla, who was 13 by then, and more interested in her phone than anything else. They ate the breakfast I made, left their dishes on the table and went about their day. Still no happy birthday. By lunchtime, I was starting to feel that familiar tightness in my chest that meant I was getting upset, but was trying not to show it. I made sandwiches for everyone, cleaned up the kitchen, did a load of laundry, ran to the grocery store because we were out of milk and James liked to have milk with dinner. Every time I walked through the living room, I'd glance at my family, waiting for someone to remember, to say something. Nothing. Dinner time came. I made pot roast with potatoes and carrots, James's favorite, which I'd chosen deliberately because it was my birthday, and I figured he'd appreciate the effort and maybe remember what day it was. We all sat down to eat. Travis had come over by then, him and Amanda. So there were 6 of us around the table and not one single person acknowledged that it was my birthday. I sat there cutting my pot roast into smaller and smaller pieces, my throat getting tighter and tighter, trying to convince myself it didn't matter. Maybe they were planning a surprise for later. Maybe they were just waiting until after dinner. Maybe I was being silly and oversensitive for wanting my own family to remember the day I was born. After dinner, James went out to the garage like he always did. Travis and Michael turned on a basketball game. Jessica and Amanda started talking about some drama with a mutual friend. I cleared the table, washed the dishes, put away the leftovers. When I was done, I went to my room, closed the door, and cried so hard my ribs hurt. Around 9 o'clock, James came to bed. He took off his shoes, turned on the TV, and settled in to watch the news. I was lying there with my back to him, trying to decide if I should say something. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. "James," I said, my voice small, "do you know what today is?" He thought for a second. "Saturday? It's my birthday." I heard him suck in a breath. "Oh, Dot, honey, I'm sorry. I completely forgot. I've just been so busy with work and—" "It's fine," I said, even though it wasn't. Even though I felt like something inside me had cracked. "Don't worry about it." He promised he'd take me out to dinner the next night to make up for it. We did go out, to the Cracker Barrel, because James liked their catfish. He paid for dinner, which he always did anyway, and that was my birthday celebration. The next day, everything went back to normal. Nobody ever mentioned it again. I told myself it was an honest mistake. People forget things. Life gets busy. It wasn't personal. But somewhere deep down, I knew the truth. I had become so invisible in my own family that they could forget my existence for an entire day and not even notice. The second sign came about a year later. I'd been feeling tired for months. Not the normal tired that comes from doing too much, but a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep didn't fix. I'd wake up after 8 hours and still feel like I'd been hit by a truck. My joints ached. I was getting headaches almost daily. Finally, I made an appointment with Dr. Patterson, who'd been my doctor for years. He ran some tests and told me my blood pressure was too high, my cholesterol was elevated, and I was showing signs of chronic stress. "Dot," he said, looking at me over his glasses, "your body is telling you that you're doing too much. You need to slow down, reduce your stress levels, maybe get some help around the house." I nodded and said I would, but we both knew I wouldn't. How could I? There was always someone who needed something, always laundry to do, meals to cook, messes to clean up. Dr. Patterson gave me prescriptions for blood pressure medication and cholesterol pills, told me to come back in 3 months, and sent me on my way. When I got home, I told James what the doctor had said. I thought maybe this would be the push he needed to start helping more around the house, to realize that I was running myself into the ground. He looked concerned for about 30 seconds, said, "Well, you should take it easy then," and went back to his newspaper. That night, he still left his dirty clothes on the bathroom floor for me to pick up. The next morning, he still expected his coffee ready when he came downstairs. Nothing changed except now I had 2 more pills to remember to take every day. I tried to bring it up with the kids. Jessica was still living with us, and Amanda was over at the house almost every day. "The doctor says I need to reduce my stress," I told them one afternoon. "Maybe y'all could help out a little more around the house?" They both agreed immediately. "Of course, Mama," Jessica said. "Just tell us what you need." But when I asked Jessica to start doing her own laundry, she said she would, but then kept leaving her dirty clothes in a basket in the hallway, where I'd see them and feel guilty until I just went ahead and washed them. When I asked Amanda to maybe cook dinner once a week when she came over, she did it exactly 1 time, mac and cheese from a box, and then never volunteered again. The 3rd sign was small, but it cut deep. It was Christmas of 2008, and the whole family was at our house like always. Michael had come home from Colorado with his wife Rachel, who I didn't know very well because they'd only been married a year. Jessica had a new boyfriend named Mark, who seemed okay. Amanda and Travis were there with their new baby, my 2nd grandbaby, little Tyler. I'd spent 3 days cooking and cleaning and decorating to get ready. Made a turkey, a ham, dressing, green bean casserole, sweet potato casserole, mashed potatoes, gravy, cranberry sauce, rolls, and 3 different pies. Set the table with the good china I'd gotten as wedding presents 40 years ago and barely ever used. Made sure there were enough chairs for everyone, enough serving dishes, enough everything. We sat down to eat, and it was chaos like always. People talking over each other, reaching across the table, asking for things to be passed. I barely got to eat because I was too busy jumping up to get forgotten items. The butter, the salt, more ice for the drinks, a clean spoon for the potatoes. By the time I finally sat down with a full plate, my food was cold. After dinner, everyone moved to the living room to open presents while I cleared the table. I could hear them laughing and talking, hear the sound of wrapping paper tearing, and I was in the kitchen scraping plates and loading the dishwasher. Finally, Amanda came in. "Mama, come on, we're opening presents." I went into the living room, my hands still wet from washing a serving dish that wouldn't fit in the dishwasher. Everyone was sitting around with torn wrapping paper at their feet, holding the gifts they'd gotten. There was a pile of presents for me in the corner. I could see them from where I stood in the doorway. "Go ahead and open yours, Mama," Jessica said. I sat down and started opening. A set of dish towels from Amanda, a cookbook from Jessica, a new mop from James. Every single gift was something for the house, something to help me do the work I did every single day for all of them. Not one thing that was just for me, just for Dorothy, just because someone thought I might enjoy it. I smiled and thanked everyone, because that's what you do. But inside, I felt hollow. I felt like screaming, "Do y'all even see me? Do you see me as anything other than the person who cooks and cleans and takes care of everything?" But I didn't scream. I just gathered up the wrapping paper and took it to the trash, then went back to the kitchen to finish the dishes. The 4th sign happened in 2010. Michael called to say that he and Rachel were getting divorced, and he wanted to move back home for a while to save money and figure things out. He was 33 years old. I was 55. And even though every cell in my body wanted to say no, wanted to say, "You're an adult and you need to figure this out on your own," I heard myself say, "Of course, honey. You're always welcome here." He moved in that spring and stayed for 18 months. 18 months of cooking for an extra person, doing an extra person's laundry, cleaning up after an extra person. 18 months of a grown man treating my house like a hotel, coming and going as he pleased, leaving messes for me to clean up, eating food without contributing to groceries. James said something to him once about maybe helping out with bills, and Michael got defensive, said he was going through a hard time and couldn't believe his own father was going to charge him rent. So James backed off, and Michael stayed for free. The fifth sign was quieter, but somehow worse. It was a Tuesday afternoon in the fall of 2012. I was at the grocery store, pushing my cart through the produce section, when I ran into an old friend from high school named Patricia Ann Weber. We'd called her Patty back then. I hadn't seen her in probably 30 years. "Dorothy Richardson," she said, her face lighting up. "I can't believe it's you." We talked for a few minutes, doing that thing where you catch up on 3 decades in 5 minutes. She told me she'd gotten divorced about 10 years ago, that she'd gone back to school and become a nurse, that she was working at the hospital in Charlotte and loving it. "What about you?" she asked. "What have you been up to?" And I stood there with my grocery cart full of food for my family, and I realized I didn't have an answer. "Oh, you know," I said, trying to sound casual. "Raised 3 kids. Got 2 grandkids now. Keeping busy." "Are you working?" "No, I'm a homemaker." She smiled. "That's wonderful. That's a full-time job in itself. But what do you do for yourself? Any hobbies? Volunteer work?" I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. I literally could not think of a single thing I did that was just for me. Not one hobby, not one interest, not one activity that wasn't related to taking care of my house or my family. I mumbled something about gardening, which was a lie. I used to like gardening but hadn't had time for it in years. We said our goodbyes, and I finished my shopping in a daze. That night, lying in bed while James snored beside me, I tried to remember the last time I'd done something, just because I wanted to. Tried to remember what I used to like before I became somebody's wife, somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother. And I couldn't. I had completely lost myself, and I hadn't even noticed it happening. The 6th sign came on a regular Wednesday morning in March of 2014. I'd been up since 6, making breakfast for James and Jessica, who'd moved back in again after her marriage to Mark fell apart. I was standing at the stove flipping pancakes, my back aching from sleeping wrong, when Jessica came into the kitchen already on her phone, already annoyed about something. "Mama, have you seen my blue sweater?" she asked without looking up. "Did you check the laundry room?" "Why would it be in the laundry room?" "Because you probably left it in the basket of clean clothes I folded yesterday that you haven't put away yet." She gave me a look like I was being unreasonable. "Can you just go check?" I stood there with the spatula in my hand, pancake batter sizzling on the griddle, and something in me just snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, internal breaking. "Jessica," I said, my voice very calm. "You're 40 years old. If you want to know where your sweater is, you can walk your 40-year-old legs to the laundry room and look for it yourself." She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "Wow. Okay. I was just asking." And I'm just saying that I'm not your maid." She left the kitchen in a huff. James, who'd witnessed the whole thing from behind his newspaper, said nothing. Just kept reading like it hadn't happened. And that's when I realized that this was my life. This was all my life was ever going to be, unless I changed something. But I was 59 years old, and change seemed impossible. The seventh sign, and really the beginning of the end, came on a Saturday afternoon in August of 2015. I was in the kitchen, where else, making dinner, when Amanda came over with Tyler, who was 7 by then, and her youngest, Emma, who was 3. She asked if I could watch them for the evening because she and Travis wanted to have a date night. "Sure," I said, because I always said sure. "What time will you be back?" "Probably around 10 or so." She left, and I fed the kids dinner, gave Emma a bath, helped Tyler with his reading homework, and got them both settled in front of a movie. Around 9:30, Amanda called. "Mama, we're having such a good time. Would it be okay if we stayed out a little later?" "How much later?" "Maybe midnight." I looked at Emma, who'd fallen asleep on the couch, and Tyler, who was rubbing his eyes and trying to stay awake. "Amanda, it's already past their bedtime. How about you come get them now, and I'll watch them another night?" "Oh, Mama, please. We so rarely get time to ourselves." And there it was, the guilt trip, the implication that if I said no, I was ruining their evening, being selfish, not being a supportive mother. So I said yes. She came to get them at 12:30, didn't apologize for being late, just scooped up her sleeping kids and left. The 8th and final sign, the one that really set everything in motion, happened on a cold morning in January of 2016. I'd gotten up early to make breakfast, same as always. James wanted eggs and bacon. Jessica wanted oatmeal. I made both, set the table, poured coffee, and called them down. They came, they ate, they left their dishes on the table without a word of thanks, and they went about their day. I stood at the sink washing those dishes, looking out the window at the bird feeder I'd put up years ago, but never had time to actually watch the birds visit, and I had this thought that came out of nowhere. I could die today, and the first thing they'd worry about is who's going to make dinner. It wasn't a bitter thought or an angry thought. It was just true. And that truth settled over me like a heavy blanket. I was 61 years old. I'd spent 43 years of my life taking care of other people, and not one of them had ever stopped to ask what I wanted or needed. Not one of them saw me as a whole person with dreams and desires of my own. I was just Mom, just the woman who cooked and cleaned and made sure everyone else's life ran smoothly. And I was tired. God, I was so tired. Not just physically, though I was that too, but soul tired, heart tired, tired of being invisible, tired of being taken for granted, tired of living a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. That was when the idea first started forming. It was tiny at first, just a whisper in the back of my mind. You could leave. I pushed it away immediately. Good mothers didn't leave. Good wives didn't just walk away from their responsibilities. But the whisper didn't stop. It got a little louder every day. If you're still with me, if this story is resonating with you, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me what you think so far, or what you would do in this situation. These small actions take you just a second, but they help this story reach other women who might need to hear it. Don't wait. Do it now. Your support means everything. The thing about making a decision that's going to change your entire life is that it doesn't happen all at once. You don't just wake up one morning and decide to blow everything up. It's a gradual process, like water wearing down stone, every little moment of being taken for granted, every expectation that you'll just keep sacrificing without complaint, every time someone treats you like a servant instead of a person. It all adds up. And eventually, you hit a point where you realize you can't keep living like this, not for one more day. For me, that point came about 3 months after that morning at the sink. It was April of 2016, and we were planning a family gathering for Easter. Everyone was coming over. Michael was in town visiting, Amanda and Travis with the kids, Jessica and her latest boyfriend. I'd been planning the menu for weeks, making lists, shopping for ingredients. The day before Easter, I spent 8 hours in the kitchen making a ham, scalloped potatoes, green beans, rolls, a strawberry cake, and a lemon pie. Easter morning, I got up at 6 to get everything ready, set the table with my good tablecloth, arranged flowers in a vase, made sure everything was perfect. Everyone arrived around 1 in the afternoon, and we sat down to eat. The meal was beautiful, if I do say so myself. Everything turned out just right. And as I watched my family eating and talking and laughing, not one person said thank you. Not one person acknowledged the work I'd put in. They just ate like the food had magically appeared on the table. After dinner, the men went to watch a baseball game on TV. Amanda took the kids outside to play. Jessica started telling me about her problems with her boyfriend, and I stood at the sink, starting on the mountain of dishes, listening to my daughter complain about how her boyfriend didn't appreciate all the things she did for him, and I felt like I was looking at my life from the outside, like I was watching a movie of a woman who'd given up everything for her family and gotten nothing in return. That night, after everyone had gone home and James had fallen asleep in front of the TV, I sat in my dark kitchen with a cup of tea and made a decision. I was going to leave. I didn't know when. I didn't know how. But I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't spend the rest of my life like this. I was 61 years old. If I was lucky, I had maybe 20 good years left, and I was going to spend them living for myself, not for everyone else. The first thing I did was start researching. I'd go to the library, told James I was taking a book club, and use the computers there to look up information about starting over later in life. I read articles about women who'd left marriages after decades. I looked at housing costs in different cities. I researched Social Security benefits and divorce law, and how to open a bank account without your spouse knowing. I was methodical about it, careful. I didn't want anyone to know what I was planning until I was ready. The second thing I did was start saving money. This was trickier because I didn't have an income, but James gave me money for groceries every week, and I started skimming a little off the top. Instead of buying the name brand, I'd buy the store brand and pocket the difference. I'd say I spent $40 at the store when I'd really spent $35. I'd collect aluminum cans from the recycling and cash them in. It was slow going. After 6 months, I only had about $800. But it was something. It was mine. I opened a bank account in the next town over, in my maiden name, and every 2 weeks I'd drive over there and deposit whatever I'd managed to save. The third thing I did was start planning where I'd go. I couldn't stay in Greenville. That much was obvious. Too many people knew me. And I knew if I stayed anywhere nearby, my family would find me and guilt me into coming back. I needed to go somewhere completely new, somewhere I could start fresh. I thought about Florida. Lots of retired folks there. Warm weather, beaches. But Florida seemed too obvious, too crowded. I wanted somewhere quieter, somewhere with 4 seasons, somewhere I could just be anonymous. I finally settled on Asheville, North Carolina. I'd been there once years ago, on a day trip with some ladies from church. I remembered it being pretty, artsy, full of mountains and nature. It seemed like the kind of place where a woman on her own could blend in, where people might be more accepting of someone living an unconventional life. It was about 300 miles from Greenville, far enough that my family couldn't just drop by, but close enough that I could drive it in a day if I needed to. Once I'd picked the place, I started researching it obsessively. I looked at apartment listings, figured out which neighborhoods were affordable and safe. I found out what documents I'd need to rent a place, what deposits I'd have to pay. I mapped out where the grocery stores were, where the library was, where the senior center was. I was building a whole new life in my head, and nobody around me had any idea. The fourth thing I did, and this was the hardest part, was make my peace with what I was about to do. Because let me tell you, the guilt was enormous. I was raised to believe that family comes first, always. That you don't give up on your marriage no matter what. That mothers sacrifice for their children, period, end of story. And here I was, planning to walk away from all of it, planning to leave my husband of 43 years, leave my children, leave my grandchildren, just so I could. What? Be happy? It seemed selfish. It seemed wrong. I went round and round with myself for months. I'd lie awake at night making lists in my head of all the reasons I should stay. James needed me. The kids needed me. The grandkids needed me. Who would take care of everyone if I left? Who would make sure everyone ate properly, and the house stayed clean, and everyone got where they needed to go? But then I'd think about that moment at the sink, that realization that if I died, they'd just be worried about who'd make dinner. And I'd think about how I couldn't remember the last time any of them had asked how I was doing, really doing, deep down. Couldn't remember the last time they'd seen me as Dorothy instead of just Mom. Couldn't remember the last time I'd felt like a person instead of a role. And slowly, painfully, I started to realize that leaving wasn't selfish. Staying would be what's selfish. Staying and growing more and more resentful, more and more bitter, more and more angry, until I became a mean old woman who took out her unhappiness on everyone around her. That wouldn't be good for anyone, least of all me. I also started to realize that maybe, just maybe, leaving would actually be good for my family. They'd have to learn to take care of themselves. They'd have to grow up, become truly independent. They'd have to appreciate what I'd done for them, instead of taking it for granted. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is stop doing everything for them and force them to stand on their own 2 feet. By October of 2016, I'd saved just over $2,000. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a deposit on a small apartment and a couple of months of living expenses if I was careful. I'd found a 1-bedroom place in Asheville, listed for $500 a month, utilities included. The landlord was an older man who didn't require much in the way of documentation, didn't do credit checks, just wanted first month's rent, last month's rent, and a small security deposit. I could afford that. I started packing, bit by bit. Nothing obvious. I couldn't have suitcases sitting around or James would notice. Instead, I'd pack a few things into a box, label it donations, and stick it in the back of my car. Old clothes I'd told James I was giving to Goodwill. Books I said I was donating to the library sale. Kitchen items I claimed I didn't need anymore. Every week I'd drive to a storage unit I'd rented 2 towns over and unload the boxes. The storage unit cost me $40 a month, but it was worth it to have a place to stash my things where nobody would find them. I also started withdrawing from my family, little by little, testing the waters. When Amanda called asking if I could babysit, I'd sometimes say I wasn't feeling well, or I had plans. When Jessica asked me to do her laundry, I'd tell her the washing machine was broken, which it was, sort of. It was making a weird noise, though it still worked fine. When James asked what was for dinner, I'd sometimes say I hadn't gotten around to cooking and he should order pizza. You know what happened? Nobody seemed to notice. Or if they noticed, they didn't care enough to ask if I was okay. James just ordered his pizza. Amanda found another babysitter. Jessica took her laundry to the laundromat. Life went on just fine, without me doing everything for everyone. And that hurt. But it also confirmed what I already knew. They didn't need me. They just wanted the convenience of having me around. By January of 2017, I was ready. I had almost $3,000 saved. I had a storage unit full of my belongings. I had an apartment lined up in Asheville. I'd sent in the paperwork and the deposit, and the landlord had sent me the keys by mail. I had a plan. All I needed now was the courage to go through with it. I picked a date, March 15th, 2017, 2 months away. That would give me time to get everything in order, to make sure I wasn't forgetting anything important. It would also put me just past my 62nd birthday, in March, which felt symbolically important somehow. I'd start my new life as a 62-year-old woman, young enough to enjoy it, old enough to not care what anyone thought. The last 2 months were the hardest. Every day, I'd wake up and think, should I tell them? Should I warn them? I imagined sitting everyone down and explaining that I was leaving, giving them a chance to change, to maybe convince me to stay. But I knew what would happen. They'd promise to do better. They'd make me feel guilty. They'd manipulate me into staying. And within a week, everything would go back to normal, and I'd have missed my chance. So I didn't tell them. I kept my secret, kept packing my boxes, kept saving my money. I watched my family go about their lives, completely oblivious to the fact that I was planning my escape. And I felt like a stranger in my own house. Like I was already gone, even though I was still physically there. The night before I left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed next to James, listening to him snore. And I felt 1,000 different emotions. Grief for the life I'd thought I'd have when I married him at 18. Anger at how it had actually turned out. Fear about what I was about to do. Excitement about the future. Guilt about leaving. Relief that it was almost over. Around 3 a.m, I got up and went to the kitchen. I made myself a cup of tea and sat at the table in the dark, looking around at the house I'd lived in for 37 years. The scuffed linoleum floor I'd mopped 1,000,000 times, the countertops cluttered with everyone's stuff, the refrigerator covered in old photos and grandkids' drawings and appointment cards. This had been my whole world for so long, and tomorrow I was going to walk away from it. I thought about leaving a note. I'd written and rewritten it 100 times in my head. Something that would explain why I was going, that would help them understand. But every version I came up with sounded either too defensive or too apologetic, and I realized I didn't owe them an explanation. I'd spent 43 years explaining myself, justifying my feelings, making myself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. I was done with that. Instead, I decided I'd leave the note simple. Just the facts. No emotion. No justification. Just, I've gone to start a new life. Don't try to find me. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Take care of yourselves. Dot. I went back to bed around 4:30 and managed to sleep for a couple hours. When my alarm went off at 7, I got up, showered, and got dressed like it was any other day. Jeans, a comfortable shirt, my old sneakers. I made coffee and breakfast, same as always. James came down, ate his eggs and toast, kissed me on the cheek and left for work. Jessica was still asleep. She'd been up late the night before talking on the phone to some new man she'd met online. After James left, I stood in the kitchen for a long moment, just breathing. This was it. This was really happening. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. My hands were shaking. But underneath the fear was something else. Determination. I was doing this. I was really doing this. I went to the bedroom and pulled out the single suitcase I'd hidden in the back of the closet. I'd already packed it with essentials. Clothes, toiletries, important documents, a few photos of the grandkids. Everything else was already in the storage unit. I carried the suitcase to the front door and set it down. Then I went back to the kitchen and wrote my note, left it on the table where they'd find it. I grabbed my purse, my suitcase, and my car keys. I stood in the doorway one last time, looking at the house that had been my prison for so many years. Just going to the store. I whispered to the empty rooms, the same lie I'd told 1,000 times before when I was running errands. But this time, I wouldn't be coming back. I walked down those concrete steps, put my suitcase in the trunk and got in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly get the key in the ignition. But I managed it. The engine started on the second try, just like always. I backed out of the driveway, and at the corner of Maple and 3rd, where I should have turned left toward the supermart, I turned right. And I kept driving. The first hour of the drive, I kept expecting to feel guilty, kept expecting to break down crying or turn around or call someone and tell them what I'd done. But none of that happened. Instead, I felt light. Like I'd been carrying 1,000-pound weight on my shoulders for decades, and it had suddenly disappeared. I turned on the radio, something I never got to do because James didn't like music in the car, and found a station playing oldies. When Respect by Aretha Franklin came on, I sang along at the top of my lungs, and I felt more alive than I had in 40 years. The drive to Asheville took about 5 hours with stops. I stopped at a McDonald's for lunch, ordered exactly what I wanted without having to consider what anyone else liked. I stopped at a rest area and walked around, stretched my legs, felt the spring sunshine on my face. I stopped at a Walmart and bought myself a new set of sheets and a couple of throw pillows for my new apartment. Things that were mine, that I'd picked out, that nobody else's opinion mattered about. I got to Asheville around 4 in the afternoon. My new apartment was in a complex on the west side of town, an older building with a pretty view of the mountains. The landlord, Mr. Chen, was there to meet me and show me around. It was small, just a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen, and a living room. But it was clean and quiet, and mine. All mine. "You moving here alone?" Mr. Chen asked as he handed me the keys. "Yes, sir. Just me." He nodded like that was perfectly normal. "Well, welcome to the building. Rent's due on the 1st. Trash pickup is Tuesday. Laundry room is in the basement. You need anything, you let me know." And that was it. No questions about why a 62-year-old woman was moving into a 1-bedroom apartment by herself. No judgment. Just a simple business transaction. I could have cried from the relief of it. I spent the first night on an air mattress I'd bought at Walmart, surrounded by boxes from my storage unit that I'd driven over to get. I ate cold pizza for dinner, ordered it just for myself, got exactly the toppings I wanted, didn't have to share with anyone. I sat on my air mattress in my empty apartment and looked out the window at the mountains, and I felt at peace for the first time in decades. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of setting up my new life. I went to Social Security and applied for benefits. I'd turned 62 in March, so I was eligible for early retirement. It wasn't much, only about $800 a month, but combined with the money I'd saved, it was enough to live on if I was careful. I opened a new bank account at a local credit union, got a library card, found the nearest grocery store. I also got a cheap cell phone with a new number. I didn't give the number to anyone from my old life. That phone was mine, for my new life, and I wanted to keep the two completely separate, at least for now. I knew eventually I'd have to deal with my family, but I wasn't ready yet. I needed time to breathe, to figure out who Dorothy Richardson was when she wasn't somebody's wife or mother or grandmother. About 2 weeks after I left, I finally worked up the courage to check my old phone. I'd turned it off the day I left and hadn't looked at it since. When I powered it on, it went crazy with notifications. Missed calls, voicemails, text messages, all from James and the kids. I sat down and went through them, my heart pounding. The first few from James were confused. "Where are you? Jessica said you left a note. Call me." Then they got more frantic. "Dot, what's going on? Please call me back, I'm worried." Then angry. "This is ridiculous. You need to come home right now. We need to talk about this." Then resigned. "I guess you're really gone. I don't understand why you did this, but I hope you're okay." The messages from the kids were similar. Lots of confusion. Lots of, "What were you thinking?" And, "How could you do this?" Jessica's messages were especially harsh. "I can't believe you just left. What about Dad? What about us? This is so selfish." Amanda was more practical. "Mom, where are you? Are you safe? Please just let us know you're okay." I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. I wasn't ready. I knew if I called, they'd try to convince me to come back, and I couldn't risk that. Not when I was still so new to my freedom, still so uncertain about whether I could actually do this. Instead, I sent a single group text. "I'm safe. I'm fine. I need time alone. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Please respect my decision. Mom." Then I turned the phone off again and put it in a drawer. The guilt tried to creep in during those first few weeks. I'd be sitting in my apartment, and I'd think about James eating dinner alone, and I'd feel terrible. Or I'd think about the grandkids asking where Grandma went, and my heart would ache. But then I'd remind myself why I left. I'd remind myself of all those years of being taken for granted, of being invisible, of sacrificing everything and getting nothing in return. And the guilt would fade, replaced by resolve. I started building my new life, bit by bit. I joined a book club at the library. Actual book club this time. Not an excuse to research how to leave my family. I started volunteering at an animal shelter, walking dogs and socializing cats. I took a watercolor painting class at the senior center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had time for. I went hiking in the mountains, took myself to the movies, ate at restaurants alone without feeling self-conscious. And you know what? I was happy. Genuinely, truly happy in a way I hadn't been since I was a teenager. I woke up in the morning and the first thought in my head wasn't, "What does everyone need from me today?" It was, "What do I want to do today?" And that shift, that simple change in perspective, changed everything. I made friends. Real friends, not just people I knew from church or the kids' schools. There was Martha, a widow in her 70s who lived down the hall and liked to paint watercolors with me. There was Sandra, a divorced woman my age who I met at book club and who had a wicked sense of humor. There was Tom, a retired teacher who volunteered at the animal shelter and always made me laugh with his stories about his mischievous students. These people knew me as Dot, just Dot, not James's wife or Jessica's mom or anyone's grandmother, just me, and they seemed to like me just fine as I was, without me having to do anything for them or prove my worth through service. About 3 months after I left, I finally turned my old phone back on and called James. My hands were shaking as I dialed, but I knew I needed to do it. We needed to talk about practical things, finances, the house, what we were going to do going forward. He answered on the first ring. "Dot?" "Hi, James." There was a long pause. I could hear him breathing, could almost see him in my mind, sitting in his recliner in the living room, trying to figure out what to say. "Where are you?" he finally asked. "I'm not going to tell you that." "Why not?" "Because if I tell you, you'll come try to bring me back, and I'm not coming back." Another long pause. "So that's it? You're just done? After 43 years, you're just done?" "James, I tried to tell you for years that I was unhappy. I tried to get you to see me, to help me, to treat me like a partner instead of a servant. You didn't want to hear it." "I never treated you like a servant." "You left your dirty clothes on the floor for me to pick up. You expected dinner on the table every night. You never once asked if I needed help or if I wanted to do something different with my life. So, yeah, James, you did." He was quiet for a moment. "I thought you were happy. I thought you liked taking care of the house and the family. I didn't like it. I did it because it needed to be done, and nobody else would do it. There's a difference." "So what now? You want a divorce?" "I don't know yet. Maybe. For now, I just want to be left alone to figure out my own life." "What about money? How are you living?" "I'm getting Social Security. I'm managing." "Dot, this is crazy. You're 62 years old. You can't just start over." And there it was, the thing that everyone thinks, but nobody says. You're too old to change. You're too old to start over. You're too old to want something different. "Watch me," I said, and hung up. I felt shaky after that call, but also proud of myself. I'd stood up to James in a way I never had during our marriage. I'd told him the truth about how I felt, and I hadn't backed down when he tried to make me feel crazy for wanting more. Over the next few months, I had similar conversations with each of my kids. Jessica was the angriest, kept telling me I was being selfish and childish. "Dad needs you," she said. "We need you. You can't just leave." I told her that I'd been there for all of them for over 40 years, and now it was time for me to be there for myself. She didn't like that answer, but it was the truth. Michael was more understanding, surprisingly. "I get it, Mom," he said when I finally talked to him. "I mean, I don't love it, but I get it. You did a lot for us. Maybe too much." That conversation actually made me cry because it was the first time one of my kids had acknowledged that I'd sacrificed anything at all. Amanda was worried about practical things. But who's going to help with the kids? Who's going to watch them when I need a babysitter? I told her she'd have to figure that out like every other parent in the world. It sounded harsh, but it was necessary. They all needed to learn that I wasn't going to be their solution to every problem anymore. It's been 6 months now since I left, and I can honestly say I've never been happier. My life is small and quiet and simple, and I love every minute of it. I wake up when I want to wake up. I eat what I want to eat. I spend my days doing things I enjoy, reading, painting, volunteering, exploring my new city. I've hiked trails I never would have had time for before. I've read books I never would have gotten around to. I've discovered that I actually really love gardening, and have turned my little patio into a container garden full of tomatoes and herbs and flowers. I'm not going to lie and say it's always easy. There are hard days when I miss the grandkids so much it physically hurts. Days when I wonder if I did the right thing. Days when the guilt tries to creep back in and whisper that I'm a terrible person for leaving. But then I remember what my life was like before. I remember standing at that sink washing dishes, realizing that I'd become invisible in my own family. I remember all those years of putting everyone else first and never getting so much as a thank you. I remember being so exhausted, so depleted, so completely lost that I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I know I made the right choice. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about being a woman, about being a mother, about being a wife. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to say, "This isn't working for me anymore." You're allowed to choose yourself, even after decades of choosing everyone else. You're allowed to walk away from a life that's killing you, even if other people don't understand or approve. It's not selfish to want to be happy. It's not selfish to want to be seen as a person instead of just a role. It's not selfish to decide, at 62 or 72 or 82, that you deserve more than what you've been getting. I started this story by telling you about the day I left, about how I stood in that doorway, said I was going shopping, and never came back. But really, that wasn't the day I left. I'd been leaving little by little for months. Every time I saved a few dollars, every time I packed a box, every time I imagined what my life could be if I had the courage to change it. The day I drove away was just the day I made it official, the day I stopped imagining a different life and started living it. I don't know what's going to happen with my marriage. James and I still talk occasionally, awkward conversations about practical things. He keeps asking when I'm coming home, and I keep telling him I'm not. Maybe eventually we'll divorce. Maybe we'll figure out some kind of arrangement. I honestly don't know, and for the first time in my life, I'm okay with not knowing. I also don't know what's going to happen with my relationship with my kids. Right now, it's strained. Jessica barely speaks to me. Amanda calls sometimes, but it's tense. Michael checks in every few weeks. None of them really understand why I left, and I'm not sure they ever will. But I hope that someday, when they're older, maybe they'll look back and see that I wasn't abandoning them. I was showing them that it's never too late to save yourself. What I do know is this: I'm happy. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I wake up in the morning and feel excited about the day ahead. I feel like myself again. Like Dorothy, the girl who loved reading and dreaming and imagining all the places she might go. That girl got buried under 43 years of responsibilities and expectations and other people's needs. But she's not buried anymore. She's right here, living in a little apartment in Asheville, finally getting to live the life she always wanted. If you're listening to this and you're in a situation like I was, if you're feeling invisible, taken for granted, like you've given everything and gotten nothing in return, I want you to hear this. It's not too late. It doesn't matter if you're 50 or 60 or 70 or 80. It doesn't matter if you've been in your situation for 10 years or 40 years or your whole life. You can change it. You can choose yourself. It won't be easy. People will be mad at you. They'll call you selfish. They'll try to make you feel guilty. They'll tell you you're too old. It's too late. You should just be grateful for what you have. Don't listen to them. Those are the voices of people who benefit from you, staying small, staying convenient, staying in the box they've put you in. You don't owe anyone your happiness. You don't owe anyone your dreams. You don't owe anyone your entire life just because that's what you've been giving them up until now. And here's something else. Sometimes the best thing you can do for the people you love is stop doing everything for them. My family is learning to take care of themselves. James has figured out how to do laundry and make simple meals. Jessica has learned to manage her own life without using me as a crutch. Amanda has found other babysitters and discovered that she's actually capable of handling things on her own. Are they happy about it? No. But they're growing, and sometimes growth is uncomfortable. I'm not saying everyone should leave their families. That was my choice, my solution to my specific situation. Your situation might be different. Your solution might be different. Maybe you need to have some hard conversations. Maybe you need to set boundaries. Maybe you need to stop doing so much and let people experience the natural consequences of their own choices. Maybe you need therapy or marriage counseling, or just some time to yourself to figure out what you actually want. But whatever you do, please don't wait until you're at the end of your life to start living it. Don't wait until you're so depleted, so exhausted, so completely lost that you don't even recognize yourself anymore. You deserve more than that. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to matter in your own life. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to say enough. It's never too late to walk out that door and start over. I did it at 69, and it was the best decision I ever made. Before I go, I want to ask you one more time to support this channel if this story resonated with you. Hit that like button if you're still with me. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one. Stories about real women who found the courage to change their lives, no matter how old they were or how impossible it seemed. Drop a comment and let me know what you think, or tell me what country or city you're watching from. Every subscription, every comment helps this channel grow and helps these stories reach more women who need to hear them. Your support makes all the difference, and I'm so grateful for every single one of you who takes the time to engage. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for not judging me, for hearing me out, for maybe understanding a little bit why I did what I did. And if you're in a situation where you need to make a change, I hope my story gives you the courage to do it. Life is too short to spend it being someone's maid. Life is too short to be invisible in your own family. Life is too short to forget that you matter, that your dreams matter, that your happiness matters. So go shopping if you need to. And if you need to, don't come back. This is Dorothy Richardson, reminding you that it's never too late to save yourself, never too late to start over, never too late to choose you. Take care of yourselves, and remember, you deserve to be happy. Thumbnail phrases. English, 169 characters. Went shopping at 69. Left my family forever. They called me selfish. I called it survival. 104 characters. I said going to the store, and never returned. 47 years as their maid was enough. 86 characters. Walked out at 69 after 4 decades. They forgot my birthday. I forgot to come back. 84 characters. Left everything behind at 69. Husband and kids learned what happens when mom disappears. 89 characters. Just going shopping. The lie that set me free after 47 years of being used. 80 characters. Best option for high CTR. Option 2. I said, going to the store, and never returned. 47 years as their maid was enough. Why it works. Direct quote creates curiosity. Specific number, 47 years, adds credibility. Their maid triggers indignation, and open ending creates gap that demands closure. Video title suggestions. English, 100 characters max. I went out shopping at 69 and never came back. My family never saw it coming. 83 characters. Grandma left home for groceries and disappeared forever. They still don't know why. 87 characters. At 69, I said I'm going shopping. 6 months later, they're still waiting for me. 80 characters. I was their maid for 47 years until I went shopping and never returned home. 77 characters. Left my whole life behind at 69, the day I went shopping and found freedom instead. 85 characters. SEO description, English, 400 words max. At 69 years old, Dorothy did something unthinkable. She told her family she was going shopping, walked out the door, and never came back. This isn't a story about abandonment. It's a story about survival, self-discovery, and the courage it takes to choose yourself after decades of being invisible in your own life. For 47 years, Dorothy was the perfect wife, mother, and grandmother. She cooked every meal, cleaned every mess, and solved every problem. She raised 3 children, helped with grandchildren, and kept her house running smoothly while her family took her for granted. They forgot her 50th birthday. They never asked how she was doing. They treated her like hired help instead of family. But everything changed when Dorothy started planning her escape. For months, she secretly saved money, researched new cities, and packed boxes labeled donations. She rented a storage unit, opened a secret bank account, and built an entirely new life while her family remained completely oblivious. On March 15, 2017, Dorothy walked out of her house in Greenville, South Carolina, with a single suitcase and drove 300 miles to start over in Asheville, North Carolina. She left behind a husband of 43 years, 3 adult children, and 2 grandchildren, all of whom assumed she'd be back with groceries in an hour. 6 months later, Dorothy has never been happier. She lives alone in a cozy apartment, volunteers at an animal shelter, takes watercolor classes, and finally has time to discover who she is when she's not busy being everyone's caretaker. Her family calls her selfish. She calls it self-preservation. This powerful story explores what happens when a woman who spent her entire life putting others first finally decides to put herself first. It's about the courage it takes to leave everything you know, the guilt that comes with choosing yourself, and the incredible freedom of starting over at an age when society tells you it's too late. Whether you're feeling invisible in your own family, struggling with being taken for granted, or wondering if it's ever too late to change your life, Dorothy's story will inspire you, because it's never too late to stop being someone's maid and start being yourself. Subscribe for more inspiring stories of women who found the courage to change their lives, no matter their age. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what you would do in Dorothy's situation.